who have graded cards of that player already and are able to put them into the marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Porter Jr. is a good example from last year. We had people grading him not based upon what he was doing at the time, but what they expected him to be doing this season as he got more playing time, you know. So yeah, some of it's forecasting where's that player's going to be in the future.
Absolutely. And I want to give everybody a great recommendation to look up those values to determine what the cards are worth. There's a great free way to do it, and that is to use our Sports Card Investor app. In fact, it's the easiest way to look up the values of your cards in PSA 10 condition, PSA 9 condition, as well as in raw condition, so you know what that spread is. You can get the Sports Card Investor app by going to the App Store on your phone and searching Sports Card Investor. It's totally free. All right, let's move on to talk about assessing the condition of cards, because I know that has such a big impact on value. So PSA is going to look at your cards based on 4 factors, and those 4 factors are going to determine the grades. And of course, you want to get as good of a grade as possible, because the PSA 10 is always going to sell for a big multiplier over what a PSA 9 would sell for, and that will sell for a multiplier over what a lesser grade will sell for. So what are those factors, Joe, that matter when it comes to grading? And more importantly, how can somebody who's going through their cards tell if their card has all 4 of those really important factors and has the potential of getting a PSA 10 grade?
Well, first of all, I would start off with centering. Whenever I'm evaluating cards to purchase or to grade out of my own collection, the first thing I look at is centering. And that was one of the hardest lessons for me to learn. We started submitting to cards to PSA back in 1998. And I remember my very first batch, I bought a large stack of 20 Gwynn rookies, and I was like, what is 80C? What is it? You know, I had no clue that, you know, the centering was so critical. But when you start getting a lot of off-center grades back, you learn it very quickly because it becomes very painful financially. So I brought a couple of examples. I'll start with the most extreme, which is I've got a 72 Topps Hank Aaron in action, which is completely...
Oh yeah, you can tell. I mean, there's no doubt the centering on that card is off, right? Yeah.
And so we often, you know, this card is almost miscut. It's so far off, but it's blatantly off center left to right. The centering, we measure things in, you know, numbers, and customers often ask, what's the centering on that? This is about 99.1.
Right.
Because you've got, and what I say by that is you have about, if you added up the left-hand border and the right-hand border, and that equals 100%, what percent of it is on each side? And then you do the same thing with the top border and the bottom border. So this one is blatantly off-center, would not grade well because of that. They get more subtle. This card's been trending lately, the David Robinson rookie 89 hoops. This one is more like 70-30. You know, you've got a little bit of border on the other side.
But still off-center enough where that has no chance of a PSA 10.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
75 Nolan Ryan.
Yeah,
same thing. Yeah, this one's like 90-10.
Yeah.
You know, again, and then brought an example of a graded card from my collection, Abraham Lincoln 72 Topps, which is an 80C, beautiful corners and edges, but too much border on the top. And
that's an interesting point, because a lot of people, when they're looking at centering, they look at the left and they look at the right, and that's important. Yeah. But also important is the top and the bottom as well. And sometimes you can end up with a card that's actually well centered left and right, but not centered top. And I saw that especially with a lot of the older cards, like when you're talking about 80s cards and 70s cards, you see that a lot where it's shifted up or down on the card.
Yeah. So I brought a perfectly centered Mickey Mouse.
Look at that.
This is a 57 Barrett Mickey Mouse 9 with near perfect. It's a mini card with near perfect borders all the way around, perfect centering.
Yep, you can tell the centering on that for sure.
So that's the very first thing.
Right. And PSA allows you a little bit of variance. It doesn't have to be dead 50-50 to get a 10. Correct. They give you a little bit of leeway on either side, but not a lot.
Right. Yeah. I mean, typically, if it's 55-45, you've got a shot. I mean, I've seen 10s that I thought were 60-40, but it's rare. It's rare. Usually, they've got to be to the visual eye. It needs to feel. I mean, I use the feel test. Like, you know, this feels pretty much spot on, you know, to have a shot. And so that's the first thing I start with when we pre-screen cards for customers, and they're saying, hey, we're really shooting for 9s and 10s. That's the very first thing, because the Prism is a perfect example. Prism the last couple of years, there's been so much off-centering, and you often right off the bat, as we go through a customer's order, we're like, nope, 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 and we don't even have to look at the corners and edges, because we know right away the centering's too far off to get a high grade.
Okay, but it's not just centering, it's also corners. I know that's a big deal. Tell us about that.
Yep, brought a couple of examples for you here. This is a 74 Nolan Ryan, classic Ryan card, but what do you see immediately?
Yeah, corner in the upper left there is definitely kind of chipped back.
Yep, so these we often, and now that's a pretty blatant example, we often